Here we go. Hey everyone, welcome to Macstock's Community Chat. This is a limited run series that turns the tables, or maybe we should say turns the stage, and gives us a chance to talk to the folks that make Macstock what it is. And that's you, the very folks who attend and support Macstock every year. Now this actually came about because when I knew I had to announce that Macstock was going to be postponed yet again to 2022, I wanted to find a way to keep folks involved. And I came up with this idea of a series of chats with attendees that I am going to informally dub the Year of the Macstock Community. So yeah, it's something a little bit different, but I do kind of envision these talks as nothing more than a chance for more members of the Macstock community to get to know each other. Just something fun to do until we can all get together again next year and actually do this in person. And I think what we're going to discover as we put out more of these episodes is that everyone who attends Macstock has an interesting story to tell. Whether it's something new and cool that they're working on, their history with Apple products, or even interesting past projects. It's all up for grabs, and we're going to talk about it right here. And this episode, we're talking to Frank Petrie. Now, Frank is a longtime Macstock attendee, he's a blogger, and he's a writer for ScreenCasts Online Magazine. Hey, Frank, welcome.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I don't know when people are watching this, so thanks for having
that was
me
a
on.
very Gazmaz thing to say. Do you know Gary?
No, yeah, I know Gary, but that was stolen from. If people are old enough that are watching this, that was stolen from Firesign Theater, who was a comedy troupe back in the late '60s, early '70s. The full line was, "Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. How difficult it is to tell what time it is when you're locked in a room with artificial light."
And that
That's
is
how they used to say
actually
it.
the very situation we find ourselves in right now, isn't it?
Yes.
As a three-time Macstock attendee, Frank, because you first came in 2017, right?
That
So
sounds right, yeah.
2017, 2018, 2019, and then we had COVID.
Right.
But as a three-time Macstock attendee, I think a lot of folks who are watching this will actually recognize you already. But why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your history with Apple Gear, and then maybe we can talk about some of your current projects.
Okay. I basically, my first Apple was an SE20. My ex was working for a law firm by night, and we met up. We both went to Temple University in Philadelphia, and there was an education discount. And yeah, I remember this is like 1995. So we were able to get the SE30 at a discount rate of $5,000. No, but even in '85, it was kind of crazy. It's like, hey, I can go out and buy a car.
Yeah, right.
I had never played with computers in my life. I had been a musician mainly, and so what happened is I started goofing with it a little bit, and I was in a video company I had co-founded with several people, and the problem is the people I co-founded with, they were brothers. So whenever we were going to have a meeting, because basically it was 2 against 1,
Mm-hmm.
I had to drive to the meeting. That was 75 miles each way.
Oh, jeez.
So I went, this isn't quite. So all of a sudden I found out there was this thing called AOL. So we started using the chat room. Now the problem, of course, back then was the modems and the internet was so slow that you would ask your question. They would ask 3 questions after that, and then you would get the answer of your question 3 or 4 questions back at that time. So you had to come up with this weird. It wasn't a thing you would wait, because if you were going to wait, you could go out and you could buff your car. So you sort of tried to how can I explain this? You sort of had to work with two minds and two trains of thought at once. So you knew this one conversation was going on, so that had to stay in this part of your brain. This other conversation was going on, and that had to stay in that part of the brain. And then somehow you had to make them all amalgamate. And then by the end go, oh, okay, we accomplished this. But I thought that was great because the thing for me is I didn't have to do the driving. So when the meeting was over, instead of going, oh, okay, I got to do an hour and a half of driving. So I thought that was great. And matter of fact, what I did is I then put money into AOL because the internet was just becoming mainstream. I think it was like $5,000 into it. And all these brokers kept telling me, no, you got to sell it off. That's going nowhere. I wrote it up to 100,000.
Wow. Wow.
But here's the way I
envision the 2020 pandemic coming back then. And how we'd all need to work from home and all need to communicate with each other virtually.
Oh, I created the pandemic.
Just for capitalizing on that investment all those years ago.
It was just a hobby, something to do with, So that's basically how I got into it. And then I went from there and I started messing around with music, which was really strange. I had always been a musician all my life, but I never really got into reading regular notation and stuff. I mean, I had to do it when I was like everybody else, when you went to the school orchestra, when you were in like middle school, when you were playing trumpet or something like that. But after that, when I was into guitar and bass and stuff like that, didn't want anything to do with it. Oddly enough, I found a piece of software, a music piece of software, and I wanted to keep composing. And I don't know why. I sat down in front of it, and it would only let you write notation. Mm-hmm. Boom. I was able to. Hadn't done that in 7 years. And I could also sit there and read the notation and hear the song in my head.
You kind of went from being a by-ear musician to someone who then starts to compose more traditionally.
Yeah, basically. And it's weird because to this day, I'll mess with piano roll, but I don't feel totally comfortable using it. And that can't. And the other thing that's kind of weird is with piano roll, I can only read maybe about 3 or 4 bars. If I was looking at the notes, I could go straight through the song. Why that is, who knows?
So music was kind of one of the things that got you further into the technology. Your creativity is what led to a little bit more experimentation with technology.
Right. And then I went through a thing where I wanted to. It was the time of life when you're like 24, 25. It's like, I got to get out of this place I'm living. So I was able to get. I went to college in Philadelphia, where I took up video. Now this was before digital was around for video. So I learned everything cutting 16 millimeter film.
Oh, film.
With razor
Not
blades.
Even quarter-inch tape.
No. We used, I think we had 1/2-inch audio tape. I loved playing with that because I used to make stuff go backwards and combine things that people go, that's an amazing sound. Where'd you get that? I said, well, they didn't have the explosion I wanted. So I found one explosion where you could hear stuff raining down. 2, I heard the one explosion where it starts off with a nice crack. But I wanted that real heavy boom. So what I did is I found a recording of somebody slamming the door to St. Patrick's Cathedral, cut the speed of that in half, reversed it, layered them all together, and I had the sound, and I loved it. But we didn't have any digital stuff. Now, I ended up getting a job years later at a TV station. And they were digital was just starting to come on the scene. And I remember Sony I think JVC, and I think Panasonic coming in, and the the head of engineering would all call us in, and we had these charts on the wall to see if it would pixelate at 45 degrees. Of course, at that time, nobody really understood what pixelating was. The engineers knew and stuff. But we, as the camera people, we could look at it and just go, yeah, that just doesn't look right. So that was an interesting way. That was my introduction to that. And now what I'm doing is I'm doing this one experiment where I've challenged myself. I took my old 8 Plus iPhone.
Oh, nice.
Sold it, bought an SE 2020. And I went out and bought a bunch of Sandmark lenses. And I want to prove that I can still make a quality film with the Sandmark lenses and their filters on the SE 2020. Because everybody's going on about, you got to buy the Max cameras. You got to get those for the true thing. No, I started playing around with these lenses. It's like, it's still the same thing. It's down to story of primarily, but lighting, grips, movement, your cinematographer. But there's been stuff like a Telluride, and the entry level competitions and festivals they have in the U.S. And always at least one of them has been shot on an iPhone.
It's amazing what people are doing, but to your point, you're absolutely right. A good high quality lens will always be a good high quality lens. You just have to figure out how to interface it, but it's always going to be a good lens.
Oh yeah, the glass is everything. I found, and what's amazing is I haven't done it in years, and also I brought myself back into this, but every now and then they put some artwork in the windows that I want to take pictures of, but I was getting reflections of me taking the picture. What you have to get is a polarizing filter. So I got that, and I found through research is they're now combining the polarizing filters with neutral density filters. Now that's weird because back in my day, you did a lot of the stuff either with the lensing, or you did gels and stuff like that to change that. But now I'm doing that, and now I just went and bought. What did I buy the other day? Oh, I bought some. Now this was something interesting. Now only film people will really get into this, but I saw on Sandmark. I was watching on YouTube. They had a video. They had a filter called the cinematic filter. And I was like, what's a cinematic filter? Because, if you take your phone and you run it at 24 frames per second, which is film speed, as opposed to video, which is 30 or 29.97 frames per second. But at 24, you get that film look. And this thing said cinematic filter. And I was thinking, well, what does that do? If you were taking your phone and you were running it at 30 frames per second, and you're shooting, let's say, a high school football game, if you were to freeze a frame, that football is going to look perfect. But if it was a piece of film and you stopped it on that frame, you wouldn't be able to make it out because it'd have a motion blur. But it's one of those things that if you were a movie buff and you watched a lot of movies, but all of a sudden it was done at 30 frames per second, you might not notice it. They may be able to do something that would still look like film stock, but it's one of those things where you don't know what's missing, but you know something's missing. Something's been changed. So I saw this filter, and it's like, I haven't used it yet. I don't know if I'm going to use it, but I was like, I've got to have it. It's the typical nerd thing, Oh, I got to have this. I got to have this. What are you going to use it for? I don't know, but I got to have it.
Well, it's really funny you say that, because one of the things I really admire about you is your inquisitive nature. When you come across something new, you have this seemingly limitless desire to learn as much about that thing as you can, whether it's a new website or an app or this platform that we're using to communicate today, Riverside.fm. You told me, and this thought occurred to me when you said, "Oh yeah, I've been watching some YouTube videos on Riverside and how to set up your recordings and all that kind of stuff." You
Oh, I wanted to
want
make sure I had it. Yeah.
You want to learn as much about these new things as you can. Even Macstock itself. I remember back in 2017 when you decided to attend Macstock for the first time, you had a series of questions. You wanted to learn more about it. You wanted to know more about what Macstock was, who I was, what the idea was behind it. You have this innate inquisitive nature. Now, we're all surrounded by tech these days, but not everyone really wants to know how tech works, right? There's that toaster effect. I just want to turn it on, spit out the content, spit out my piece of toast, and move on. They don't want to know how to make it work better, right?
Yeah.
But is that natural inquisitiveness? Is that really what is that the thing that led you to this life of tinkering?
Things interest me. Well, I have one major flaw. Now you're right. I really want to know stuff. Let's say that much. Unfortunately, my retention is like this. So anything I learn, I forget in 10 minutes. It's I can't think of there's an old joke and I can't even think of it. But I still want to go after. I want to, it's like, well, why does it do that? I need to know. And it's great when Macworld, well, I went to Macworld for all those years, and then of course you came up with Macstock because you basically answered what we were all missing from Macworld.
The community.
And in a very unique way. We still got to do our parties, but I also found it much more interesting, Macstock, in the sense that you have those 20-minute sessions, and if you want later in the afternoon, you go into the deep dives, or you can go into the afternoon. And it wasn't that way at Macworld. At Macworld, it was like, well, let's be honest. At Macworld, well, as a reviewer, at Macworld, my main thing was I wanted to see my friends, I wanted to party, I wanted to see Steve Jobs, and I wanted to pick up some stuff for free and go back so I know I had stuff to write about for 6 months. And the great thing about Macstock is with my low retention rate, I can pick up on stuff. And even with the low retention rate, I know the last one we had was 2019.
2019, yeah.
And I remember going to that, and somebody was talking about something in the morning. And I had originally planned that in the afternoon, I was going to go to this other deep dive session. It turns out they were doing a deep dive back on the main stage. And it was just something that I had no knowledge of, or any background or anything I could relate to it. I went back, and I sat there for a couple of hours, and it was just an amazing thing.
You know where I got that from? The 20-minute sessions. That idea was borrowed from TED Talks. TED Talks are limited to 18
I watched
minutes.
those, yes. I never thought of that.
18, they have a limit of 18 minutes. And if you remember, well, you wouldn't remember actually, because you weren't at the first Macstock. You weren't at Macstock 2016 either. But we had a little evolution of that idea. At the first Macstock, which was only a day, I kind of had to strictly enforce that 20-minute time session. And some folks had trouble with that because they wanted to share more. That's the nice thing about the presenters is they're so knowledgeable and they just want to, it's not like they want to keep that information private. They want to share it with the world. And so they all felt like they needed a little bit more time. And so in 2016, we experimented with a couple presenters and said, why don't you guys take a little bit more time, but we'll do it under this guise of deeper dives. We'll give you a little bit more time to some of the speakers. And then it became the thing. So in 2017, we migrated to where we are now, and that's the 20-minute presentations, the little tasters,
Yeah.
Let's get a little taste of this topic, and then if you want to learn more, you can go sit in on that deeper dive. And if it's not something that you want to learn more about, there's another deeper dive going on at the same time, or you can go out and participate in the hallway track.
Well, see,
So
now,
it has a lot of flexibility going this way versus locking people into sitting there for a 2-hour extravaganza
yeah.
on whatever.
Now you got to go out and hire yourself a set designer, because you got to get, how it always says behind them TEDx, Vancouver, Paris, Berlin, New York,
Yeah.
Schenectady. Now
I thought
you're
about
going to have to
that.
get, I think it says Mac X Woodstock, or Mac X Macstock.
Yeah, yeah. I thought about that. It seems a little out of the budget at this point.
Actually, that'd be a neat thing to do, a YouTube channel. Oh, no, I don't know if that would come under the law as a parody. I was going to say, if you could do like an intro and an outro, and put it on these things like you're doing right now, or on their presentations,
Do a little walkout
and
on a green screen stage.
that would be great. That
Well,
would
I
be,
do kind of
green
do
screen,
it.
there you go.
If you remember Virtual Macstock, I did create that background for Virtual Macstock, so I guess I
Oh
could
yeah, I
kind of
remember
do
that.
something like that. Yeah, yeah, that turned out okay.
Now, there's an interesting question I have. Now, from watching on Yelp, YouTube, YouTube sort of drives me nuts as much as I'm addicted to it, because
Yeah.
YouTube, they break every single rule I was taught in film school.
Oh,
Yet, if you watch, they all copy each other. And I've never gotten around to it, but I wanted to actually make a parody YouTube video. And as I went through it, instead of saying stuff about Mac, I was going to explain what this next thing I'm about to do is completely wrong. This is one of those things where you go, I got an idea, but there's some pizza in the corner. I'm going to have some pizza.
my walkabouts. Like the one I did when I announced the postponement
Oh, I like those.
of Macstock to next year. That's a borrowed idea. That's an idea that I borrowed from some of my favorite vloggers. I'm also addicted to YouTube. I mean, that is late at night. If the TV's on and I want to watch something, I switch to the YouTube channel on my Roku, and I sit there and watch. And a lot of the vloggers I watch are long form vloggers. So the minimum their shows are 20 minutes, but typically they're 35 to 40, 45 minutes long. And it's always, before you know it, they're over. But every one of them does the handheld camera, talking to the camera, talking directly to the audience. And I love that. I love that feel of directly communicating with you. And it does make you feel like you know them a little bit better. And so I like that technique. And so I've tried to use it. And each time I do it, I think I get a little bit better at it, but nowhere near what someone who has, 10 years experience doing it has,
Yeah,
certainly.
but the thing is, when you do your cuts, now you're doing your audio correctly, so you always want to make it so you have a breath in between your cuts, so it's natural speech. But you're
Right.
cutting from one place to another,
Right.
usually.
Yeah.
On YouTube, they've got that camera just locked in. And what they do is they just cut so that their vocal goes straight. So the problem is the vocal sounds great. But to go from one sentence to the next, their head's over here, then all of a sudden, boop, it's over here.
Yeah.
And it makes me cringe. It's like, wait a minute, I paid money to be told not to do that.
Right.
And
Right.
it's just sort of, it's kind of weird. It's developed a whole new language in how you do video to a degree. As opposed to, like I said, there's the films. The films still stick to the method you're supposed to do it, or they come up with something new. So it just drives me crazy sometimes.
The natural speech is important to me, but that came from podcasting all these years. It's interesting to record something and then watch that waveform play back in Audacity and know instinctually, after all these years looking at that waveform, what needs to be cut, what can be shortened, how long that pause should be between breaths,
Yeah.
things like that. And so I don't quite have that same visual cue in Final Cut Pro, but I try to use the same type of pacing in the videos. But the cut from scene to scene, that actually does come from some of my favorite vloggers as well. So
Yeah.
it's certainly not something I invented. It's something that I
Yeah.
unashamedly borrow.
Well, everybody borrows. I mean, that's the whole computer industry. And the old, of course, cliche is, if I've seen over the mountain, it's only because I've stood on the shoulders of giants.
What I'm noticing is that some of these vloggers are starting to adopt some of the traditional film methods.
They're getting more professional.
They're injecting B-roll. You know, they're letting their audio they're letting their audio continue, but they're injecting B-roll. They're doing hard cuts. There's no some of them do
those are called assembled edits. Yeah.
Yeah. And those quick hard cuts are what I was experimenting with. Is total experimentation. In the last video I did, the last walkabout, I was experimenting with that. It turned out okay.
Interesting. The whole interesting thing about it is the thing I was taught in film school, because there's really not a lot. Oh, actually, we did video, but it was in the old days, 3/4 inch videos. This was before
3/4 inch
beta.
tape, yeah.
And I would become obsessed with doing things. I was a perfectionist. And I remember doing one thing where I was editing it, and there was this guy. There was a museum down Brandywine, Pennsylvania. And the guy was the curator of this museum. And what the museum was this guy's house. And this guy that had lived, he, I guess he was born in the late 1800s and died maybe the 50s or 60s or something like that. He would do something like, let's say he attended a speech by Harry Truman.
Mm-hmm.
What he would do is he would save something that was on him from that day, put it in a little envelope. So it might even be just his shoelace. But that's the shoelace that was on my shoe when I saw Truman.
Wow.
And he saved these, and he had thousands of these things. Now, the curator, now this was before YouTube came up with a different thing, and I'll get to what it was about. He would talk to you, and he would start to say something. Then he would finish his sentence. And so then he'd start another sentence, and he'd finish that. So what I had to do, basically, is he said enough in the beginning that I could establish him physically. I could show his face and stuff like that. Literally, 80% of the rest of the video was B-roll, because what I had to do was cut his audio together so it was lucid. And if I could sneak in maybe 3 seconds of him so that people remember who's talking, that was fine. And it's weird because I'm reminded by watching YouTube, and I was thinking of it when you were speaking, was that one of the things they taught us in film school is that probably 60 to 65%, the most important thing in your film or your video is your audio. Because audiences will forgive ratty looking video. I mean, not super ratty, but let's say like you're watching something and it was pixelating all over the place. Audiences will forgive that. They will not forgive bad audio. If the audio's sort of popping in and out and it's just not rhythmically right, they'll move on.
I've heard that from several sources, and I think it's true. Yeah. So many people, I do this myself. I watch a video, but a good deal of that watching is just simply listening and absorbing and hearing what the presenter's saying, but not necessarily paying attention to the visual images that are going by on screen.
Well, also it's YouTube's perfect for it. There's this one guy I watch. All he does is, well, most of them, they stand in front of their set. The set doesn't change. All you're getting is the audio information. So what do you end up doing? You tend to walk around the room and do other things. So in essence, it's like radio with pictures, but you're not looking at the picture.
Right, right. I'll give you a prime example of where that technique doesn't work well. And I've come to realize this in just the past few weeks. My daughter and I traditionally, we'll watch a lot of anime, Japanese anime. And traditionally, what we watch is the dubbed version. However, we've been watching the original Japanese audio version with subtitles, the subbed version, if you will. And every once in a while, I'll find myself letting my attention, wane away from the TV screen. And then I realize a minute later, I have no idea what's going on because I was missing all the subtitles. So whereas like normal television, I could absorb what's being said and catch up pretty quickly. But then I have to sheepishly turn to my daughter and say, can we go back 2 minutes because I missed all that dialogue just now?
I do the exact opposite. I've never met anybody else that does this. I will watch the first 5-6 minutes of a foreign film. It's got the subtitles. Because I refuse to listen to anything that's been overdubbed. I can't stand that. I will watch the first 6 minutes, and I will read, and I will follow. And you start to learn the actor's intonation. Once you learn what they've set it up for, I stop reading the subtitles. I just listen to their voices because I know where they're going. Well, my ex used to really get angry at me because we put on a show, let's say like Law and Order or something. And from the credits, you always knew the big name was the person that was either going to be guilty or get knocked off. And then within the first 5 minutes, I could tell where they were going to go with it. So I used to tell her after 5 minutes, this is what's going to happen in an hour. And eventually, my ex started slapping me, and she said, don't you say a thing. Because I want to watch this.
I can see where that would be a little aggravating.
Yeah, I do that to people.
Okay. I think you've answered this question pretty well, but I'm going to ask it anyway. This is a question in my notes. I have this question. I know the answer to this. Okay. I think you might surprise me. You might surprise me. But here's my question.
Do you want me to lie if what you think it's going to be?
No. Here's the question I wrote down.
Okay.
Because I've come to know you fairly well over the past few years, but I thought I'd like to ask, do you consider yourself a creative person or a tech person? Or do you find yourself, like so many of us do, I find myself in this category, or as Steve Jobs has famously said of Apple, at the intersection of technology and liberal arts?
Oh, no, I'm creative all the way.
Creative all the way.
Oh, you can ask any of my friends who still edit video and stuff like that or stuff. I will forget things. If I haven't done it in the last 7 minutes, I will totally forget it. I could sit here and talk about it and logic it out, but for some reason I have this fear that if I touch it, I'm going to screw it up and I'm not going to have that, that article of thing. I'm sort of like Alfred Hitchcock used to famously say he loved writing the story and storyboarding it. After that, he lost all interest because he knew how the movie was going to run, what it was going to look like, what the pacing was, and what the ending was. So to him, it was just work. It was just, he really didn't care. And I did the same thing when I was in high school. I guess over a period of 2 years, we had a art teacher, and she was only about 25, and she would let me and my friends, we would cut classes, and she let us sit in there. And we'd sit in there, and I got really heavy into doing ink and watercolor. I taught myself. And I was doing all this stuff, and I was getting into it. And then it came graduation time. And so now I have a bin of about 1,200 drawings. And she said, "What do you want to do with them?" I said, throw them out. I have no need for them. Because to me, it was, I mean, now I look back, now that I'm older, it's like, well, I'd be curious to see what I did then. You know, and with the technology we have today, I would have been able to do that. But to me, it was like, no, that's just something I'm going to have to carry around with me. I'm not going to look at them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think aesthetics easily come first. Matter of fact, I've been in video. When I was in video for about 4 or 5 years before I had some health issues, I never once made a demo reel. Never once. Because it was like, no, I've done that. I've moved on from that.
Everything you do from this point forward is new and different. It should be new and different from what you've done in the past.
Right. And to me, that's the important stuff. Stuff I've done, well, I've done it. I don't know. Now, it's a dumb move in a business sense. It's an extremely dumb move. But that's just the way my tiny little, whatever that thing is in there, that little gray pea, that's the way it looks at things.
Then, let's talk about your blog then. Your blog is at YMPNow.com.
Right.
I think you also refer to it as
the only one that says that.
Freshly squeezed.
Right. I either do freshly squeezed reviews or freshly squeezed op-eds. And now I've started doing a thing on my my page that's supposed to be about, and I call it moi. I now change the quote every week to whatever mood I'm in, and then I sort of do a almost like a small journal.
Yeah.
I guess because I found myself going, that really, I started doing that for the op-eds when I was out of ideas. And I thought, that really is not going to draw people in. Why don't I just make that a little side thing? And the op-ed probably be better on my take on, what's going on in the industry, which directions they're taking, what I'd like to see them do. It's like that's like the story we were talking about the other day. I want to do a video of, because of my health issues, I can't reach certain things. So a physical therapist came over and she goes, "I'm going to make your house handicap accessible." She goes, "I'm noticing that over your nightstand, over your thermostat, it's over the nightstand. How do you reach that?" I said, "Easy. I went down to Home Depot, spent $4, bought a dowel, went to the dollar store, bought rubber kitchen gloves, cut the fingers off them, glued them on the end of the dowel. I know how to operate that thermostat, so I just poke at it." And actually, since I told you that story originally, I've made now another one for the microwave. So I've got stuff just lying all about the place, so I don't have to move anywhere. And she looked at that and she goes, "Show me this other room you got." So I showed her all this stuff I made. It was sort of like out of the Little Rascals. And we came back into the main room, because I have a studio apartment. And she sits there for a minute and she types something and she thinks for a minute. She goes, "So let me see if I understand this. We pay engineers and developers to come up with these devices so you can control all this stuff from your chair. And you could buy that device for $50, $70. But you're telling me you went to Home Depot, spent $4 on a dowel, went to the dollar store, bought some kitchen gloves, cut the fingers off, and Gorilla glued them on the end, and you could do the same thing." I said, "Yeah." And she took a deep breath and she goes, "Well, I guess I don't have to do anything here." And she left. I haven't seen her since. And that was 8 years ago.
And that's that's one of your current projects, is this accessibility hack series that I believe you're working on for another blog, right?
Yeah, we're in talks about some stuff. I've already written one article, but we put it on my website. Did we put it on my website? We put it somewhere. Yeah, but I have some ideas that I'm putting together, like the Dowel series, some other things I've made, and just try to get people to think outside of the box. It's like using the camera here.
Mm-hmm.
I've got the camera sitting right now on a microphone stand, and I went to Target and I bought a little camera stand they got, and I took the thing off the top. Now, I had originally bought a glyph to put on here, but the glyph didn't work. I don't know why. I've had glyphs before, it didn't work. So I got this other thing. But before I had this, I had a mic holder. I took two lint-free cloths that allowed me to wedge the camera into the mic holder, and then I just plugged it into the iMac, and that's how I did this.
Maybe you're already thinking along these lines, Frank, but it sure sounds to me like you've got a book brewing here.
You're not the first to say that. It would depend what it's about. If it was my life story, no, I don't want to go through that again.
No, the accessibility hacks. I mean,
but
you have an entire book at your fingertips here, at your cut off Gorilla Glued fingertips. You've got an entire book here.
But we also have an entire country of lawyers, and that's the one thing I'm trying to get them to straighten out, is to make sure that we're covered. That somebody all of a sudden doesn't come up with this weird idea that if I took a dowel, I could use it in my oven. And they accidentally leave it in the oven and it catches fire.
Not to mention the flammable super glue.
Right, the super glue and the rubber glove and so on. So it's like, we got to get the legalities straightened out, because otherwise, there's no need to spend a lot. I mean, well, sometimes you got to buy things. There's no choice. But sometimes you can do stuff that's just insane.
Well, it's for entertainment purposes only. That's how you position
it's almost,
it.
That's funny. Now that I never thought that way. It's almost like an aesthetic thing.
That's right.
It's like a little show. It's like, oh, I can do this.
Well, okay, so you are unashamedly a creative person, but it's clear that tech is a passion for you. In fact, we should make it clear that your blog, YMPNow, Freshly Squeezed, is clearly a creative effort, you're
focused.
It's technically focused.
Yes.
But it's technically focused while you put your own spin on things.
I try. It's funny. You were mentioning before, I write for ScreenCasts Online.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about that too.
Do you know our editor, JF?
Yes.
Do you know him? Okay.
Yeah.
I've told JF, and also we have another guy there, Rob Workman. I said, always read my articles closely. Somewhere in there is going to be a line from a song. It's either going to be in the title or it's going to be buried somewhere in there. I'm going to mutate it in a way, but there's going to be a line from a song in there. And to me, it's just sort of like a little challenge. It's like, once you learn this stuff, and then what I do is I'll watch, maybe YouTube, see what other people thought, see if there's anything I missed. I'll play with it for a while. Then I write the intro. It's weird the way I write. I tend to write the intros and the outros before I've actually worked with the equipment.
Oh, interesting.
But I write them in a way so by changing just 3 or 4 words, I could go from a good experience to, man, that was a nightmare. So that saves me time. So all I have to do then is write the actual bulk of my experience and how it works, what it has, what I thought of it. And that's how I can change the beginning and the end.
The sign of a good reviewer. It's a time saver, but it's the sign of a good reviewer.
It's a sign of someone who's lazy, because it's great. I can go up till like 24 hours before I have to have that article in. I go, oh, I got to go play with that, and I'll play with it for like 3 or 4 hours. I go, oh yeah, okay, it does this, does that, and I make that article, and then I just adjust the opening and the close.
How did your gig with ScreenCasts Online come about? Did Don, and I should say that's Don McAllister, Don McAllister of ScreenCasts Online, I should say. Did he stumble across your blog? Did you reach out to him? How did this come about? How long have you been working for them?
I've been with them, I think he said 12 years with the magazine. I think, now, I can't say this is fact. I think only Wally's been with the magazine, and Don have been with the magazine longer than me. I'm not really sure how Don found me. We had met at Macworld, and my thing was I had started writing articles and reviews for the small name companies, because this was in the early day where we used to go to Macworld, and there was always the monolith booths of Apple, Microsoft, and Adobe.
Sure.
And I kept thinking, they've got deep pockets, but there's these other guys and women who are developing stuff that is fantastic, but they don't have the pockets to get that PR out there. So I was in a user group, and they needed material. So I said, well, let me goof around with some stuff. So I just started writing some stuff. So quite honestly, it might have been from that, because what happens is I wrote for my user group and in some other user groups. Now, I don't know if the audience knows, but Tom Piper.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
So stuff goes through Tom, and then stuff went through Chuck, and they have a network where they send your articles worldwide. So all of a sudden, I got sort of this global thing going. So I really have no recollection, but my guess would be that somehow Don found out through that.
Now, did YMPNow, did your blog start because of your experiences writing those, or did you have the blog before that?
Actually, YMP used to be Your Mac Podcast, because I did podcasts.
I was going to ask you where that came from.
When Chuck started out, and everybody started out, and Ken started out, from Mac OS Ken. I was doing a podcast as well. But then, back to the aesthetics, I started going, everybody's doing the same thing. They're all doing Apple. So I decided to do a half-hour variety podcast every week.
Oh, cool.
And it was a one-man show. I would set up the camera, the phone, and I would go stand, and I would pick out the weirdest locations to do the show from. I'd find, like, abandoned buildings that were half burnt down and stuff like that. And
that's pretty
I would
cool.
just make up stuff. And then I had this one thing, and I found a couple of pieces, and this, unfortunately, again, it's one of those things. I didn't save any of the stuff I wish I had, but there's some still floating around on YouTube I found. I used to, and this is, sometimes I will do things that are inventive, but I do them as a cheat because I'm lazy. So I thought, okay, I've got to come up with a half hour each week. If I could shave just 5 minutes off that'd be good. So what I did is, from going to Macworld, I met Don, I met Chris Breen, and I met all these people. Now, everybody knew them as Mac luminaries. And all they wrote about and talked about was Mac stuff. So Dennis Sellers was another one, because I was working for Dennis for a while. And I got an idea. I thought, they're writing about all this tech stuff, but they're just people. I've met them. They're just humans, and I went partying with them. I know what these people are like. So I approached lots of people, and I said, I wonder if you'd do me a favor. I want you to do 5 minutes of video, but it can't be about computers. Anything you want, do it, but it can't be about computers. So I got stuff like and I found it. For some reason, I still have this piece. I have Chris Breen explaining how to make the perfect bologna sandwich for lunch. The kind of bread you need, the kind of bologna you need, the kind of mustard you need, the kind of tea you're supposed to have with it. I had Dennis Sellers do one where he actually dressed up as Richard Petty. And he was sitting in front of the guy, and he had the glasses on, the cowboy hat, and he had a big 2-liter thing of Mountain Dew. I mean, it was just hilarious. Ken Ray did, he found some app that was animation. He wanted to get into animation. But at that time, animation it was even pre-Mario Brothers. It was that bad. But Ken wanted to goof with it. He says, "Is that okay?" I said, "The 5 minutes is yours, whatever you want." Oddly, there was only one person that, except for one time, couldn't do it about anything but computers. And that was Don. But Don did something really strange. Don would record his 5 minutes. He would put his camera on the console of his car, and he would talk while driving to the gym. And I've toyed with doing a variety podcast. Again, the more I watch YouTube, I'm like, somebody's got to do something to break this up. This is getting nuts because they're all starting to sound like each other. They're quoting each other,
Yeah.
And I'm like, I got to come up with something. I don't know. It's been so long since I've been in that kind of mode because normally to do stuff like that, I need someone to bounce off of. And particularly during the pandemic, I don't have people to talk to because what I tend to do is listen to people and then I completely torture what they've said. Or if someone will tell me something that they think is crazed, I'll up it a notch.
Now, you have gotten into you shared one of your videos at Macstock.
Yes. And it can be seen right now on Fun for the Disabled.
Exactly. I was just going to mention that. It's entitled The View from My Chair. It was a hit. It was a hit. I loved it personally. And as you just mentioned, it was recently republished with a little bit wider distribution, I think, on funforthedisabled.com.
And to give myself a little plug, I'm quite proud. Vanessa wrote to me and she said that's 65% more hits than anything they've ever put up.
Isn't that amazing?
And I was just like, that's great. And just for the audience to know, what it was is I wanted people to see the view I see from my wheelchair. Because I see people's stomachs. That's all I see.
Yeah.
So what I did is where I live, I have restaurants across the street, and across the street before the pandemic came, there's a bar, still open, but we used to all hang out there. And so what I did is I couldn't come up for the life of me. So this was one of those last-ditch things. And then all of a sudden dawned on me, I said, actually, that'd be kind of interesting. So what I did is I took I think it was a gorilla mount and a GoPro, strapped them onto the one arm of my wheelchair, and we went from my living room down the hall, down the elevator, across the street, and into the bar. Now, up until that point, everything's fine. There's nobody in your way, nobody to stop you, just the doors I have to transfer, little things like that. But once you get in the bar and the bar is packed and you're trying to get through, then you got a nightmare. Now, if you see the video, you'll see a lot of people saying, "Oh, clear the way, clear the way." Well, that's because it turns out all those people there that night had just graduated from the firefighter academy. Oh. So they were being very very polite.
They understood. They knew.
Right. Exactly. What I was hoping originally to get was when I go in there on nights and you're behind somebody and they're just standing there for 5 minutes. Now, of course, that video would have ran too long, but I sort of wanted to get people the idea of, yeah, you can get through some stuff. I'm sure it surprised some people that I got around. Like if I had done something with me driving, people were like, "You do that?" Because I still get that from people.
You drove to Macstock.
Yeah, every year, yes, all the way from South Jersey to Chicago.
That's right.
Yeah, and I miss it too. I really do miss it. In certain ways I do. it's weird. I'm a terrible passenger, but I love to drive. I found for some reason Ohio is amazing to me. Ohio keeps their roads perfect. Their rest areas are cleaner than, geez, Lord and Taylor's, or some high end department store. Matter of fact, their bathrooms are like that. I told the one guy, I was coming back. I think it was the second year, and I went into the restroom, and there was a guy in there cleaning up. I said, I don't get it. And the guy looks at me. He goes, what? I said, your bathroom is cleaner than the Lord and Taylor's where I shop back home. How do you guys do that? But that was just their way of doing things. Yeah. And then, of course, Woodstock, well, that's where they filmed, for those of you who don't know, that's where they filmed Groundhog Day with Bill Murray. That town, it really is right out of a movie. Yeah. I mean, the town is absolutely gorgeous. It's like whoever the city planners were that laid out that town really knew what they were doing. Because that town is absolutely phenomenal.
I discovered a little side note there. I actually discovered one of the original drawings, the original layout of the town square from 1844. It's really interesting to see that, because at the time, what you see now wasn't necessarily all there. There were more wood structures. There were, right, open stables. There were homes on the square. That was essentially Woodstock at the time. Right.
Well, that was the neighborhood. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting to see how it's evolved and developed through the years. The Woodstock Library has a phenomenal collection of old photos on their Flickr pool. And it's really interesting to go through and browse through these photos and see a time when that building didn't exist. I see that building. That building's from 1905, but it didn't exist at the time this photo was taken. It's really...
What do you mean there was no Starbucks in the 1860s?
There was no, that was a wooden structure. When I came up with the idea for this, I kind of envisioned this being like sitting around the lunchroom table at Macstock. There are so many fascinating people, so many interesting stories to tell, and you hear those stories either at the lunchroom table or in the hallway track, as Chuck Joyner likes to call it, where you're just standing out in the hallway, gathering, talking to people. And I see from our time that we are well past lunch, and we're into that first presentation of the afternoon. So I think we'll go ahead and wrap up this conversation. But before we do, I had one more question for you.
Sure.
I guess it's kind of self-serving, but you've been to, as we said, 3 Macstocks so far.
Right.
When we can gather again next year, what brings you back to Macstock each year?
The people. The people, quite honestly, every time I went to Macworld, which was me flying, and I was still in a wheelchair, from Philadelphia all the way to Frisco. The main thing, we all liked, meeting the new people. And at that time, in the early days, you met the new developers, people that were coming up with ideas that weren't out there. Because you had basically the main people, Microsoft, Adobe, Apple. And there were people that were finding these little cracks in the industry. And they said, oh, I could plug that, Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But still, if you talk to anybody that went to Macworld, the big thing was it was sort of like family. Each year you were going to go back and you were going to get your one chance to see that person again who you've been texting all year. And you really wanted to see him. But my computer family, all you guys that I've known over the years, I love seeing you guys again. I mean, we get into some of the craziest talks, and then we play jokes on each other and stuff like that, and And I've made some good friends. When I'm on other podcasts that are like panel podcasts, that's the only time I get to see those people. We still communicate through text, and then we get to see each other on the show, and there's a camaraderie. It's weird. During the day, yes, you want to learn everything you can. I remember cornering Kelly Gumont.
Oh, yeah.
In the hallway when she was working for TextExpander. And I said, I can't get it to TextExpander to do this one thing. She goes, oh, easy, just do this. And I thought, instead of buying a book, I actually went to the person whose job it is worldwide to tell people how to get that thing right. It's incredible. But that night, as you recall, we did a video. It was the same year that we showed my video. And we did it. She came up with a video to everybody saying thank you to you.
Yes,
for
I do
all your
recall
hard
that.
work. And do you remember who closed it?
I don't remember who closed it.
It was me.
Oh, now I feel
I was
bad.
I was the last person. And what I said was, everybody's little thing was they would praise you. They go, Mike, we want to thank you. You've done a wonderful job and all this stuff. And she came up to me at the end of the night. She said, you got to get this so I could get this edited and get it for tomorrow. And we were out behind the restaurant. And she was back far enough that you could see I was in a wheelchair. And I said, Mike, I want to thank you. You've knocked it out of the park again. You've done a fantastic job. This has just been wonderful seeing everybody get. Oh my God, when I came here, I could walk.
That's right. I do remember that. I do remember that. Yeah, that
and that was strange because Kelly apparently had the idea all along to use me last. I don't know why. And we had not discussed a thing. And she had just cornered me. And that just came out of me.
That was one of those situations where it was totally unexpected. I certainly didn't know it was coming. I knew something was going on. I mean, you can kind of tell, especially with Kelly.
Yeah.
I knew something was going on. I didn't know what it was, and then to see that, and to try to absorb what was being shared with me through that video was so overwhelming. And that's kind of the feeling I get every year at Macstock is this, the overwhelming, there's never a relief that it's over. There's always I want this to go on longer. And
always.
People
start doing that, staying over an extra day now.
Yeah, well, we're going to be 3 days next time. Next year, it was going to be this year, but next year it'll be 3 days. It'll be 3 days. So we'll get one more year or one more day out of it.
I remember I used to leave at 5 o'clock so I could get on the highway because I had to drive all the way and hopefully get to Ohio. And then the next day I could go from Ohio and get back to Jersey, make it a 2-day ride. But then all of a sudden, the last few years, people were like hanging out going, no, they'd hang at the bar. And then the next day they'd go to Chicago for a little while.
Yeah.
Then they'd go home.
Yep.
But Mike, I can't, I just want people to know this guy and his family. I don't want it in any way short shrift what his father, his wife, and everybody does. It's an amazing show. I mean, it's so. You know what makes it? And it didn't dawn on me till now. I think the thing that makes it very, very special is it's personal.
It is personal. It's very personal to me, and it's personal to my family. Yeah.
Right. At Macworld, it's all business. This is instruction and lots of fun. And the food is great. Speaking of the lunch.
The lunch is good, isn't it? They do a great job. The kitchens there at McHenry County College are amazing, and they always work with me to come up with something new and different every year, which I love. It's never the same box sandwich every year.
Well, I like it because they cover vegetarians,
Yep. Yep.
and then they
Everybody
come
is
up
covered.
each year. They mix it up a little bit.
Yeah.
It's good stuff. It's
No,
great
no,
stuff.
never a question on their part. If somebody has special dietary needs, they make sure that that person's covered, and I think that's
Yeah.
just amazing. Yeah.
Well, every now and then I still watch. I got my photos up on my Apple TV, and I got tons of photos from like with Barry, I'm with you, I'm with Tom Piper. I took one of I think I did a panorama of the lunch line one year that went like halfway through the building or something like that.
Yeah.
I love that stuff. I look so much forward to. I mean, even meeting up with you guys, even in these trying times, is a breath of fresh air. It's something to look forward to. It really, really is.
And that's what I wanted to do with these videos. I wanted to bring that kind of community spirit back into the fold. Not that it ever left, but back into the fold during this time that we have an extended break from getting to see each other in person. We can see each other in Zoom, we can see each other in FaceTime or talk on the phone or whatever, but there's something special about seeing my Macstock family in person.
I'm still amazed how it was personal last year using Zoom and that software that Marina found, where you
Yeah.
can like walk around and have discussions with people, and you could hear them in the proximity how close your character was to the other character.
Spatial audio.
And if you, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. I never thought of that.
That's what they
But
call it, spatial audio.
It was just so bizarre, but it's still, yeah, you would have rather seen each other in person.
Yeah.
But as substitutes go, you pulled that off very, very well.
I think because we all know each other, I think because we've seen each other in person, the 200 plus folks who come to Macstock, because we have that physical idea of who the person is and how they act and how they'll react to certain things we say or do, that makes it a little bit more natural. But as our community continues to grow, I'm definitely looking forward to seeing everybody in person again, for sure.
Well, yeah, it's interesting.
But we'll
'cause
do
I'll
it when
go
the
on
time
s-
is right.
Yeah.
We'll do it when the time is right.
Yeah. I go on some shows and I get in the chat room, and I've actually, met people in the chat room, let's say for somebody's show. Then I go to Macworld and I bump into them. Like Norbert.
Norbert, yeah.
Norbert I met in a chat room for some show. And then the next thing I know, there he is at Macworld.
There are whole stories about how Barry and I met, or how I met my good friend Eric, or met Gary Gazmaz, or Guy, or any of those folks. And it's funny how in the case of Barry, it was a situation where he knew my voice from the podcast, and we just happened to be at the same Microsoft conference downtown Chicago.
Oh, really?
He heard me talking and came over and said, "Are you Mike Potter?" And it was from that point that the friendship blossomed. So you never know how these interactions are going to touch people, or how folks are going to react to what you're saying, or when you'll actually get to meet them. And for so many people, and there's another great example, Gazmaz, Gary had been on my podcast for years and years and years, but I never met the man in person. And Macstock 2015 was my opportunity to meet him in person.
I would love to meet him. I follow his pictures on Facebook all the time.
Oh, he's
And stuff like that.
fantastic photographer.
That and I want to ask him how he puts up with Guy.
Guy's a great guy.
That's
Guy's a great guy.
inside joke. No one else will get that. It's an inside joke.
Well, I think that's going to do it for this episode. I hope everyone enjoyed it. If you have any comments or feedback on the show, or you have an interesting project that you would like to share with the community, just drop me a line, Mike@macstockconference.com, or you can send me a note on Twitter @MacstockExpo. I would like to thank my very special guest, Frank Petrie, for joining me today. Thank you, Frank.
Thank you for having me.
If folks want to know the best way to get a hold of you or to learn more about you or your blog, how can they do that?
Well, the best way to get a hold of me is by the neck. But if they want to watch the blog, YMPNow, or see, when you said that, that blew me away because everybody else, when I'm on Chuck's show, I have to go YMPNow.com. Or you can find, I write for ScreenCasts Online Magazine for Don McAllister. That comes out at the first of the month. If I could give a little pitch for Don, it's a very good investment because he has, was it 15 years of tutorials now?
Mm-hmm.
And he's bringing in more people. So it's like, if you sign up with him at ScreenCast Online and you sign up for the tutorials, you get the magazine free each month.
You get the magazine free and you get all those previous years of tutorials. You get everything.
I was just watching them the other night because there was some piece of software. Again, it was more than 7 minutes since I had used it. I had to remember this one thing. I needed to know this one little detail. So I went to the tutorial, sure enough.
Well, thanks so much for listening, everyone. And we'll talk to you next time. There's my big wrap up. There's my big wrap up. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll talk to you next time.
As usual, I loved Macstock. I really did. But God, before I got here, I could walk.